If you offer social media services, you may do all of the work yourself at this time, but chances are, as you scale up your company, you're going to be looking for ways to save time, and that may involve looping in additional freelancers. So in this case, if we're talking about social content, you're likely going to be looping in a graphic designer or a copywriter or both, or even a project manager who can just do things like scheduling and moving posts through the process. So there's a number of different contributors that can come into play when you're creating content. And for me, what was so important in managing this process for larger clients when you're creating, say, upwards of 50 posts a month is having a concrete structure to follow for everybody in the team to follow so it's all uniform. And I like to do that inside of ClickUp. So I just want to preface this by saying that there is no one way to best manage your business. If anybody tells you like there's one good ClickUp setup and that's the only way to do it, they're not right, because ClickUp can be customized so well for exactly how you work. And that's what I like the most about it. So when I'm showing you what the setup that I've set up for this particular scenario, when you're working with a graphic designer and a copywriter and a client, keep in mind that any of these pieces can be customized to replicate how you work, right? There's different stages of content creation that you're likely to go through. These are the ones that I have followed. So if this doesn't match up with how you're working, please know that this can be customized, and hopefully you're going to see how that can be done. And that's really the point of this video. It's not to show you this one way to set things up. It's to show you how to think about setting up your ClickUp so that it can work for you and really serve you in your process, so things don't feel as chaotic and messy when you're managing multiple clients and multiple calendars all at once. It can be a lot. And publishing tools are great. I know you can do a whole bunch of things in them, but they're, in my experience, they're very expensive, and they also don't necessarily replicate the process that you follow working with all these different creators. So I'm going to show you what this looks like, and that'll make more sense as we get into it. So in terms of how I have created content in the past for clients, I follow a very specific process in terms of starting with the calendar build, which is really just building out a framework of ideas. Loose ideas, rough ideas. This is what this post is going to be about. This is what type of post it's going to be. And then from there, whether you involve the client or not, that's up to you. It depends on the client. So I have always liked to have the client go in, review the topics that I'm suggesting, give their feedback, and ultimately provide an approval. And the reason for that is that I want them to make sure that what we're talking about posting, or the posts that we're allocating for them for that month or for that week or whatever time frame that you're creating content for, line up with what they care about and what is important in their business at that time, right? We want to make sure that we are promoting all of the things that are important to them. So say they've got an upcoming webinar, they have a new blog post, it's a certain theme of month that's important to them. We like to get those all locked into the calendar and make sure that we're aligned before we move into creation. And the reason for that too is so that we're not doing a bunch of work and then they're like, hey, wait, actually, what about this post, this post, this post? We're trying to reduce the amount of back and forth with clients, and I find it's helpful to have them review first. So I like to do that in this very first view. So typically what people do in ClickUp is they'll just have like, you know, create posts, do graphic design, do copy, and that's great. That's like very traditional project management. I like to create each post as a task in addition to that, right? So I still have those tasks of create content calendar and the subtasks within it so that everybody knows when they have to do their portion. But I also like to have each post as a task inside of ClickUp. And the reason for that is so that it can physically move through the different stages of content creation visibly inside of our ClickUp and have subsequent statuses that kind of tell us where it is in the process. So it's very clear where each post stands. So let's just start here. So for calendar build, I'm just going to say this is an example post, right? So this is what I would do when I'm creating content or creating this content calendar. Say the client has given me their post ideas. Okay, upcoming webinar promotion. These are terrible titles, just for the record. Discounted product offering. Again, very terrible. These should be just enough to describe what the post is about. So I've got these other columns rather set up. And so post type. So let's do this as a carousel. This one is going to be a Reels. This one is going to be a single post. And I'm going to put a summary here and say like, this post is going to be about, and I'm going to do that for each post in my content calendar framework, right? The whole goal is so that we can give this to the client and say, hey, Yay or nay? Do you agree with this or not? And if you don't, what do you want us to do instead? So, yeah, this post will promote the upcoming webinar and ask people to sign up. Oh my gosh. Ah! Okay. And then discounted product offering. This is a post about our 25% discount on all of our products. Let's just say that. The spelling in here, that's one limitation, I suppose you could say, of using ClickUp, is that there's no spell check in this scenario. So that's okay though. It doesn't matter. This is just meant to be a summary. I have my content pillars here. So if you have a client and you use content pillars, you can create a custom field or a custom field for your content pillar. So I'm just going to choose one here. No, this is about our webinar, which is about mentorship. And let's say that this one is also about mentorship because it's our program. Our post goal for this one is to attract, this one is to sell, and this one is to give value. And since we're going to do an upcoming webinar, I think we'll be using a link in bio, or actually talking about the link in bios for those ones. And I have a little spot here if I think I need a Reels cover as well to kind of indicate that already. Now there's a source link here too. If you have the URL all ready to go, then you can input it there. So essentially now what we've done, what we would do for however many posts you're going to create, you would go through and build out this framework. And when it's all done and you feel good about what information's in there and it's ready to go to the client, I'm then going to set my topic status to pending approval, right? So what that's going to do then, because feedback I've had before is that clients can sometimes feel a little overwhelmed with all the information. I think everybody does. Even the contractors have said there's too many columns, there's too many rows, whatever. It's just a lot to take in. And I get that because not everybody's involved in every step of the process. They don't understand the purpose of every column. Well, there is a purpose for every column. So what I've done is created a client approvals list. And I've set up an automation that whenever I change the topic status to pending approval, it then adds it to the client approvals list. And what I've done here to make this so simple for the client is I have 3 views, and they're numbered, right? This is numbered in terms of how the process flows. So at the very beginning stage of number 1, we are asking them to review and approve our topics. So you can see very easily here, I've got it sorted by our topic status. So it's very easy for the client to say, okay, these are the ones that are pending approval. Okay, great. I'm going to give my feedback here in the comments. I guess these should have dates as well if we're talking about content. These should have dates. No, they're not all going to be the 15th. Let's just make it sure. These are just all over the place, but it doesn't matter what the date is. So now the purpose of the client is just to come in and say, hey, yeah, slight tweak, remove this, postpone this, whatever makes sense. Let's just say, because we want this to be a really easy and effortless process, they're all going to be approved. So great. Now the client is only seeing what they need to see, right? Very simple. There's nothing to be confused about. They're not seeing anything irrelevant. But over here in our social content creation side, now these posts, because we have another automation set up that says when the topic status is set to approved, move this post into the execution phase. So you can see here I've got status is set up for all of the content creation phases. Very simply, execution, client review, ready to schedule, scheduled, and published. So now that automation has moved those posts into execution. So what does that mean? So now, and again too, I didn't mention this calendar view as well. If you're somebody who likes to see things, make sure that everything is set like, okay, I don't want this to be on this day, I want this to be on this day. You can move things around and just make sure every day has been posted on. There's this view as well. So it kind of depends how you work. I like to toggle between the two just to make sure, yeah, that I've covered all the days that we typically post on or that our strategy dictates, and just use the 2 views in tandem. So because these have been moved into execution, the next step of our internal process, or was for me and my clients, is to move into the creative direction phase, right? So if I'm working with a graphic designer, what I need to do is provide them with creative direction. I need them to have all of the things that they need to do their work so they can just come in, hit the ground running, and start doing their work. If we're also using a copywriter, that may mean that we need to involve the copywriter before the designer because we need text overlay. If we're doing a carousel, we may need to have the slides all built out for the copy so that the designer can just paste them into their editor tool and move on from there. So what that tells me is that we need individual copy statuses and creative statuses, right? If I'm a designer and I'm working with me, I want to come in and very easily know, okay, which post am I supposed to be working on now? Or if I'm a copywriter, same thing. So in this case, I've created these individual statuses, and these are really helpful. So what I will typically do as the account manager and ultimately the one who owns the client relationship, I want to make sure that I'm setting up my team for success. And that usually means I'm going through each post now that the client has approved and providing a creative direction. So this may look like going through Instagram and saving links. I've got a link field here for design inspiration. Maybe I'm pulling from Pinterest for like anything that I'm inspired by. I might even just include previous posts we've done in the past and say I'd like to do this similar style again, right? And then, so that's enough to provide. So let's say I'm like, let's make this post in the same style as we did for the previous carousel. This is a terrible description, but then I would put a link to that here. So I'm going to put instagram.com, pretending I have the link, right? So amazing. That would be enough right there for the client, or no, it wouldn't actually, because this is a carousel. So what I would then need to do, since I need carousel copy, is I would engage the designer, or the copywriter rather. And you can see that the columns here are all set up just for creative direction, right? We've got design inspiration, client content request. I'm going to get into that in a minute. That's a new field I've added recently based on a different client that I was working with. Working files, similar. I'll talk about that in a second. Reels status. So if these are reels, I found that you kind of need a separate status for reels just to kind of go through the process to say, okay, this one's in draft in the platform and ready for review. Like, it's just a different kind of process that you tend to follow with reels. So I have a separate status for that, and then a video cover field as well. And that was kind of why we did those check marks of reels covers over here at the very end. And you can move these around in order, whichever serves you. So keep that in mind. If this order doesn't make sense to you, you can make it work for you in whichever way you see fit. But ultimately, this is just a place for us to figure out the copy for our creatives and the creative strategy so that the designer can come in and do what they need to do. So I have slides 1 through 10 here for our slide or our carousel copy. So I'm just going to say, I don't know. I don't even need to include, this is example post copy for slide 1. This is example post copy for slide 2. So you get the idea, right? It's, whoops. This is, yeah. So at this point, let's say this one is ready for design. If we wanted a copywriter to do the copy, we could then tag it as right? But let's say I'm the copywriter in this case. I'm just doing it. So I'm going to say, you know, I'm going to leave it as nothing right now because we're not doing post copy yet. I'm going to set this one as design. So in this other view that I've set up, because I've found that some contractors really enjoy just having their own views. They don't like the table view. They more like this view. They like the Kanban or the cards that they can move through the process. So this is another option that you can do for working with people on your team. You kind of have to learn what works best for them and give them a view that is for them and only them. I don't mind working in this view that has all the columns, but I'm in it every day. So it's a little bit different. So I have this creatives board. So the designer would then be able to come to their board and say, I see which posts are ready for design. They could open up each post as they're designing them and get all the same information that they would from the tabular view. And then when it's ready to be reviewed, they could just very simply move it into review stage. And that makes it so easy for me as the account manager to know which posts I am now accountable for reviewing, right? So here it is. Amazing. This one is ready for review. I've got a column set up here for internal creative review. And there's also here at the very end, their finished creative column. So let's say they add in their graphic. I'm just going to put a picture of myself in there because it's handy. And I've got kind of two options for how I want to give feedback. It's really up to you, again, how your team works best. If you like to just put your comments directly on it, you can say add comments. I can even specify where on the image. Like maybe I click over here and I say, can we take away some of this empty space? Something like that, you know? Then it's very clear where I'm talking about. And you can even tag the designer in there as well. But what's nice about it is you don't really need to tag them because it should show in here that there is a comment. Now, sometimes you do need to refresh ClickUp, so keep that in mind. It is a technical tool, so it's not a perfect science. It's gonna take a little bit of refreshing every now and again, but here you can see it says 0 out of 1. So it's very clear to know which one. So I'm gonna say, as the account manager, I'm gonna say revise. And so the designer is gonna be in their view again and be able to very quickly, creatives board, and very quickly know, okay, here I've got something in here for revision. I can see that the comment has been left here. Amazing. So easy to do their work and for me to do my work. I can also use this field if I prefer. I like this graphic, but I think it needs to have a little less empty space. Perfect. Okay. So let's say like these ones are all ready for design. Actually, let me take one step back before I move on. An additional thing that sometimes will come up is if a client doesn't really give you anything to work with, say they don't have any content to pull from, it's like you're drawing from blanks. If you need the client to film a quick video, like if we're creating reels, it's so easy for a client to just pick up their phone, like sit at your desk, as you know, a clip of you sitting at your desk, working at your desk, and then you could create a reels from that, right? So that's kind of like the content workflows that we're looking at these days so that content can be more rapid. Ideally, a client gives you like a full library of content that you can pull from over time. But if you don't have that and you need to do it on a more one-to-one basis, what you can do is put in here a client content request. Can you please record a 30-second vertical video of you sitting at your desk? Right? Super easy. So again, this is me as the account manager who's doing this. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to put the creative status to client. Okay. So if we come back to our client view, right? Because we only want our client to see what matters to them, right? In stage 2, provide content. Here we have a view just for them for any posts that need pieces of content from them, right? So I've included in here the post, what it's about, what kind of post it is, the content pillar, the summary about the post, and then the client content request, as well as a place for them to include their working file. So let's say they go ahead and they create this little 30-second clip. They've attached it just like I've done here. Amazing. So as the account manager, I can then see here, again, this might need to be refreshed because that's typically what will happen if I'm bouncing. Okay, here it is from working file. So here's our working file that the client has attached. Amazing. So now I can go ahead and say, hey, designer, this is ready for you to design. I have this working file that you can use. Amazing. I can also say, hey, copywriter, these are ready for you to write. These are ready for you to design. We can do our internal rounds of feedback, just as we said before. And eventually we want to get to the point where all of these are set to approved, right? That's the goal. We want both the copy and the creative to be set to approved. The other thing I haven't switched to is the post captions view. So if a post is set to, one second. Right, okay, so I'm just bouncing around a little bit too much here. So let's take a step back. These ones are set to write for copy. If I go into my post captions view, so the creative direction is meant for the copywriter to help me, or if I am the copywriter in that case, to text overlay for the graphic designer. Now the post captions is just specifically for post captions, right? So I've got a post copy column here. I've got the summary, the creative direction, so they have a bit of an idea of what, and then also the finished creative, right? So then they could just come in and be like, this is my post copy. If I, as the account manager, want to change this, I could copy it and I could say, this is the copy for my post, right? So that's how we can kind of keep track of the versions a little bit. And then I would then say, okay, this is ready for review. And again, similar sort of back and forth until everything is approved. So just kind of making it more streamlined for each creator or contributor to see only what they need to see when they need to see it, so that people don't feel overwhelmed. Overwhelm is the antithesis to creativity. I really believe that. We want to be organized so that we can be free. And so all of this feedback I've gotten over the years of working with different people inside of ClickUp, clients and contributors, And so this is what I've learned. And again, coming back to the idea that you can set up your ClickUp in whatever way serves you. So if it's just you working on this, this is way too many views, right? You don't need this many views. You need a view for you and the client, and that's it. But if you're working with other creators and you want to track the status of each post, or say, for example, you're just doing sprints of content, okay? You're doing 7 posts at a time. It allows you to kind of move them through individually, right? You're not waiting for all 7 to be done. It's like, this one's now ready for copy. This one's ready for creative. This one is in review with creatives. This one is being, it's more fluid to how you actually work and a little less rigid. And I love that about it. Okay, so let's keep going with the process. So at this point, as the account manager, I'm going to go in and I'm going to see, okay, all of these are set to approved, right? So we've got, let's put this one to approved as well. So we're at the point where they're all approved. So I'm going to give it one last look, right? This is the one last gatekeeper look that I'm going to do before I push it through to have the client look at it. So just as a due diligence, I'm going to go through, make sure all of the copies attached, make sure that the creatives are attached and it's exactly how I want it. When I'm ready for it to be reviewed by the client, I'm going to move the status from execution to client review. And what that's going to do is it's going to move it from this creative direction view into our review view. And that's just simply based on a filter, right? The status is client review, very simple. It moves it out of our creative direction view. Once I give it a refresh, sometimes it pushes it through without me having to refresh. Sometimes, especially because this is a live demo, it's a classic case of technical difficulties. Oh, for God's sake. Why aren't you reloading? Rage! Okay, that might have been a shift error. I just did reload through right click instead, and that helped move it through. So now they're out of creative direction and they're in review. Amazing. So if we come back to our handy dandy client review view, then again we come to stage 3, which is approvals. I think my internet is not very fast right now because oh, classic live demo. I'm so sorry. Hold on, please. Okay, we're now in stage 3. It's loaded. And post feedback and approval, right? So they're only going to see the posts. Again, this is a filter where the status is client review. They're only going to see the posts that are ready for them to review, and they're only going to see the information that's required for them to do that. So really just streamlining it again. We've got our final post status set up here on the side. So this is how they're going to give us their approval. They're going to give us their feedback in the comments because that makes it really easy for us to go back and forth rather than using something static like the post copy field or the long form copy fields. They've got their dates, the post type, the post copy, the post goal, and the finished creative. Super easy. They don't have to get bogged down in the details. So let's just go in and say that these are set to approved because this is a very perfect client. They don't have feedback. They're just like, yes, you're doing great work. I love you. Thank you. Okay, so now because those posts have been set to a final post status of approved, we have another automation that's set up where it's going to change the status from client review to ready to schedule. So these are things that are kind of happening in the background. You don't see them necessarily right away, but they're happening. And that's how it just flows. It flows and it just mentally makes me feel so much better, right? Because I can come back to my creative direction. Oh, I have nothing in creative direction right now. Nothing is being written for post copy. No, there is. So here's one thing. You can set a filter so it moves things out, right? I could say copy review status is not approved. That's probably the better way to do it. One thing I found is sometimes people are like, oh, I pushed something and I didn't mean to, and now it's disappeared. So I try to sometimes leave things like in calendar build. I've left the views there just so you can kind of see it, but you can filter them out so that they do physically move, right? So if I'm the account manager, I'm going to come in and I'm going to look at this view and say, okay, we've got 7 posts that are ready to schedule, and that's it. Every other view, every other status is empty. So we're in scheduling now. So this is the perfect setup, right? So if I'm somebody who's coming in, I'm coming in to do my scheduling, then I'm just going to need the information that I need for scheduling, and that's it, right? Which at this point is knowing which post type it is And I could even group it by that, right? I could group it so that I could go post type. I could go channel by channel or format by format. Like, very beautiful. So nice. It works for you in whatever way, again, whatever way serves you. So I'm going to make my face smaller because it's super annoying to move it around all the time. So if I'm scheduling it, then I have my post copy. I know if I need to include a link in bio, and I've got that link over here as well. Maybe I'll put those next to each other. Oops. I've got my finished creatives. I've got my video cover. I've got literally everything I need to do the work that I need to do. And what I have in addition to that is a publishing status. So actually what I'm going to do, I'm going to delete the ready because I've got rid of that as well now. So I've got scheduled and manually published. So this is one thing I want to talk about specifically. So even in scheduling tools, there are certain posts that you need to post manually. So let's say you're creating a Reels natively inside of Instagram. You can't schedule that, unfortunately. Maybe one day you'll be able to, but at this point, you would just have to go in and push that draft into schedule. So what I would need to do then as the person who's responsible for that is have a task assigned to me. And what's beautiful about doing it this way is that each of these posts are a task, right? We're inside of ClickUp. Everything in here is considered a task. So, alternatively too, if you're doing stories and you want to add polls or those interactive elements, you need to do it manually through the actual app, through your phone. And ClickUp has a really great mobile app. So you can very easily get that notification to your phone. It's also going to show up in your home screen. And it's going to you can easily download the creatives, copy the copy, and paste and do all that wonderful stuff right there on the fly. So let's say for my carousel, so let's say for our Reels. So for Reels, I am going to set my publishing status to manually published. And I'm going to assign it to me because I need to do it, right? So now that has been technically done. That's done. That's published, or that's scheduled rather. So the goal is to really go through here and we're going to schedule. And for anyone that's a manual publish, I'm going to assign it to somebody. Whoever needs to be the one to actually do it is going to do it. So now at this point, when we're in the scheduling phase, we can very easily see which ones are scheduled and which ones still need to be done, which ones are manual published, and we can assign them to ourselves or whoever is responsible for it in one very easy to use view. Now the last piece of this puzzle is that an automation is set up in the background where if a scheduling status is set, right? So you saw that I was doing publish or manual publishing. In any case, that status has been set. An automation will then take that content and move it into a content management library. So the idea behind this is that we just want to have a place for all of our content to live after the fact. And we especially want to see which posts are coming up and which posts are still need to be scheduled. But the best part about it is that we have like this library of content forever and ever that we can refer back to. And we can very easily categorize it by content pillar or by post type. And if you're a super keener, you can even create a checkbox that says like, this is a high performer. You could create a view here that's like content insights, and you could go in and provide insights for specific posts that are tagged as high performers. So you can go back and be like, hey, which ones were our high performers? Why were they? How can we replicate posts like this? And just kind of have that like library that you can come back to again and again. And so now we come back to our social content creation view, and all of those posts are gone because they're not being created anymore. It's done, right? And so now when we come back to our client approvals view, that we don't see anything as well because everything has been finished and is safely being safely being managed inside of our content management view. So this is kind of an example of what you could do to use ClickUp for this purpose. And streamline how you work with your creators so that you can very easily know where posts are and which status. And it can be simple for everybody involved, right? There's no confusion as to who's working on what and when. The client doesn't feel confused about how to give their feedback or to how to be involved in the process. And again, I just want to say, like, this is not the be all end all of setups. If this seems a little bit confusing to you, then perhaps this doesn't serve you as to where you are now. I would encourage you to think about what this process could give you in terms of extra time and less stress. Initially, it might seem like a huge change if you're using spreadsheets or however you're currently doing your process, but I would encourage you to give it some thought. Like, how is it that you're actually working on content? What are the stages that you're following? And how can you streamline them a little bit so it's easier for everybody? And if you have any suggestions or ways that you currently work on your content that you feel is easier than this, that gives you more joy, that serves you more than this ever would, I would love to hear it. Please give me all of that feedback. Let's learn from each other. Remember, to be organized is to be free. At least that's how I feel. So yeah, I hope this video is helpful. Please let me know. And if there's anything else you'd like me to create a process around, let me know in the comments. I'd be happy to take a look at it. And yeah, this is until next week. Until next week's tip. I'll see you then.